search has changed forever. No longer are
Yes.
people just going onto Google to find you. They're going into chatbots and they're being
Yep.
directed often to your competitors because they have very specific needs and wants.
All right. Welcome, friends, to the Digital Edge, where we talk about retail, e-commerce, and everything in between at the intersection of technology, data, and intelligence. I am your hostess, Ellie Ronning. I actually, just a quick background, I spent better part of 15 years in corporate retail myself and have now gone to the dark side and work in the retail tech space, working with, retailers and merchants that I've either had the pleasure of working for in the past, or working with. So I'm excited to be here. We've got a really fun format that I think we're going to do going forward for the Digital Edge. We've got a massive lineup of a really great talent here at Signified that each week we're just going to talk about current events, topics that are top of mind, maybe something we've seen in the news and retail news. So I'm going to start actually from top to bottom because I can see him on my screen. I want to introduce Mike Cassidy. He is our head of PR here at Signified, and I would say our wordsmith extraordinaire. He's also been here for a better part of 8-9 years, so he really knows where the bodies are buried. We've also got Vito Petruzzelli, who is our resident e-commerce risk intelligence consultant. That's just a fancy word for saying he's an expert. Also, the host of the weekly Fraudcast. If you haven't checked that out, please go do. And last but not least, we've got Grace Olson-Davidson. She's got 2 last names, which means she's twice the fun. And she heads up our partnerships and event marketing here at Signified. So I'm super excited to have you guys here. I think this is going to be a really fun format for us to do each week. Welcome. Should we get started? So the topic today I thought, guys, was interesting. I sent you all an article. It's now a couple weeks old, but that's fine. We can still talk about it because it's very relevant. I recently read a great article on Retail Dive, which is one of my favorite kind of outlets just for getting snippets of news and kind of current events, called Retail's Risky AI Commerce Bet. And this is also kind of me, hot off the heels of me going to NRF last month and just talking with a lot of merchants about agentic commerce and AI and kind of what this new world means. And I will say, probably just to kick it off, I don't think merchants have the answers yet. And I do think and Mike, this is maybe where I'm looking at you a little bit because you've been doing a lot of research on this as well. I think there's a lot of speculation in the market right now of how advanced merchants are with things like agentic commerce. And, I think what I've heard through the grapevine is that it's probably inevitable that these changes are coming down the pipe, but we're maybe not quite there yet. And it's a kind of a brand new world. It's a new channel of business. I mean, for lack of better kind of phrase, like it's, when you think about when e-commerce became a thing 10, 15, 20 years ago, I kind of liken this to a similar evolution in the retail industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true. It's crazy. I mean, when people talk about people in the industry, when they talk about agentic commerce, they're talking about 100 different things, and it's sort of like you might remember the I guess it's still going on, but the green energy revolution, and everything was
Yes.
green, right? Green this,
Yep.
green that. Well, there's a little bit of that going on, I think, with agentic commerce, and I think to your earlier point that for merchants there's a wide scale of understanding, enthusiasm, fear, a lot of different, depending on the organization, a lot of different ways to look at it. I think the one thing that everybody can be pretty confident about is what you also said, that this is going to happen. How exactly it's going to happen and when, I mean, those are 2 pretty big questions, and we may not be able to answer those right now, but it's coming.
Vito, what are your top of mind thoughts before I get into any other more specific kind of questions?
Mike brings up a great point, as always, that it's a mixed bag of a disparate bunch of things. I think what merchants need to take away from this is agentic commerce means search has changed forever. No longer are people just going onto Google to find you. They're going into chatbots and they're being directed often to your competitors because they have very specific needs and wants. Find me this shirt at this size, at this color, at this price point, etc. I've talked to so many people in e-commerce, from executives to people who are on bleeding edge, and unfortunately, one of the things that is forgotten in this whole conversation is referral. So many merchants don't have visibility into how they're being referred by these agents or how many orders are even coming in that are referred by such agent, like from ChatGPT to Claude, et cetera. Starting there is a good point. It's we can forget about the bots making orders for people. That's real, that's happening. That's not happening at the scale that referral is happening. So if you remember one thing from today, it's don't listen to me, listen to everyone else who's on this panel. The second thing to remember is start asking questions about referral from the chatbots.
Absolutely. I think that actually just naturally segues into one of my kind of a sub kind of topic here coming from this article is like, search and discovery is changing so drastically with agentic and all of these kind of agentic platforms, right? Like I am starting my search on ChatGPT or I'm starting my search and discovery on Gemini or Perplexity or whatnot. So the one of the things in the article is like this idea of like data ownership and kind of disintermediation of retailers. And so like, ChatGPT is now becoming that first line, right? Instead of me going perhaps to the website, right? The direct to consumer website. So there's two things. It's like how does that change um things with like brand loyalty, right? So me being very loyal to a brand and always going to their website, always transacting there, always discovering there. And the second piece is how does it change the data that retailers have and the behavior like about their consumer, right? All of that stuff that's happening now, it's like one removed now from retailers because it's not happening on their platforms, right? So I think that's a really fascinating bit of like tension that's starting to arise from all of this.
The first word that like pops into my head is also regulation. Like, what are the barriers that are going to get put up, right? Because I think some of the things I've read about ChatGPT joining the chat, as it were, on shopping and selection and who's doing what. There's the conversation of macroeconomics and how those prices might change and who gets those controls over who sees what and transparency and I think that's, to me, in my perspective, that's like the first thing that makes me
Yeah.
hesitate of what am I
Yeah.
trusting? What's real for me and what's real for my neighbor.
That is going to be a huge deal when you think about, major marketplaces, maybe one that starts with an A. You always wonder, like, why am I getting these three recommendations right off the top here? And I do think and it's probably a little naive because I am naive. But I think, consumers are getting smarter and smarter. And my hope would be that knowing retailers, they're going to realize, hey, we can't keep our business going if we're just going to put stuff over on people. And somehow this is very Pollyanna, but somehow these platforms and retailers are going to have to get together and figure out, like, yes, you are controlling our traffic, but we have what people want, and so we need to work together on these things.
Exactly, because the other part that I thought of too immediately was as that change happens with who's owning the data and who's got full visibility into that customer journey, like as that shift of power happens, retailers still need to acquire customers, and there's a very hard cost associated with that. But if they're also then not being able to own that data in the same way, it's making that cost of customer acquisition, I think, so much more significant for them, right? Because it's like I am spending marketing budget and money and all of this stuff to try to gain new customers from different channels. And if they're just staying on this, a chat GPT or something like that and doing their search and discovery and if at some point a one-click purchase, it has we haven't threaded that and stitched that entire journey together yet, but then where does it leave the retailers? Right? It's kind of like I'm still spending that money trying to get more customers because at the end of the day, that is part of the retail game.
And if we're blind to referral, then we're blind to attribution. And if we're blind to attribution, we're blind to optimizing our spend. And this whole thing becomes a big lump sum of money that we can't steer and direct. And that's what stops you from being promoted, I think, in this game. So we got to figure that out.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. I mean, that's kind of like, if you go on Instagram or I'm not on TikTok, but if you go on Instagram and you're shopping or whatever, there's always still that option to go to the retailer's website. And I think merchants fight for that, right? Of course, that traffic is it's akin to having foot traffic into a store, right? Like you always want to try to get as much foot traffic into the store. Now that other channels of social like interaction and shopping have come up over the years, like a TikTok and a Instagram, merchants really have to fight to still be included in that flow. And that's why it's kind of like go back to the site and, then you're not on Instagram, sure. And so it'll be interesting to see how that kind of fight between a Google and a merchant. To your point, Mike, maybe it's like a coalition that needs to, I don't know what happens from here, but there's going to be a tipping point, it feels like.
It reminds me of restaurants. It reminds me of pandemic. And, a lot of restaurants weren't built for apps and weren't relying on apps. They were relying on foot traffic or word of mouth or history, loyalty. And so, there was a big shift that had to change for small businesses and a lot of education that needed to be given to these spaces where accessibility to these kind of products are not 100%. We also live in a world where Wi-Fi isn't everywhere. Smartphones aren't in everybody's hands. ChatGPT isn't on everybody's phone. And so if we're now going to spend and invest in this place that's alienating our customer base more and more and more and more, that's going to also cause a pop, because at the end of the day, I mean, to me, I think my history in restaurants and that world has dictated how I move through this business. And we always want the repeat customer. I don't care if it's $20. I don't care if it's $10. You want the person who comes back every week. You care about the person who's spending $100 that one time. But to be quite honest, I'm not worried about them coming back. I'm worried about my guy who's here and I'm getting his updates all week, So it's that same mentality of what are we doing here? Who are we selling to? And what's important?
I mean, does that then become a business that you're a network that has this marketing data and you're able to show merchants, hey, this is where your traffic's coming from?
I
Uh,
was just going there, Mike. It's like you and I are on this
Please
literally
do.
in the same headspace.
Well, your head may be a little brighter than mine, so go ahead.
Well, I think about like back in the day when SEO was new on Google and like search engine optimization companies did not exist. And I actually chatted about this on the last Digital Edge 101, interview. Was what came up from that was this organic kind of businesses or these consultancies, for lack of a better word, that help the companies and merchants stay ahead and optimize, because it never used to be, they never had to before, right? And so I do feel I'm thinking the similar thing, Mike, where it's like, are we now going to move into a place where either, services or companies are going to spring up from this to help companies, merchants really stay kind of at the forefront or stay at the top of the heap? My biggest question is, as we move into like a GEO, AEO world, how do you optimize for that, especially if a Google is really the one kind of owning that behavioral data or that kind of first party data, that search and discovery data, right? Like that's one of my big questions. I don't know what that looks like in the future.
Well, I bet to a merchant, it kind of looks like I'm looking over at my profit margin and it's like, oh no, here's another hand reaching in. It's like all along the purchasing
Yes.
journey, somebody's taking a little bit and, here
Yep.
comes another bit.
Well,
Right.
and
Right.
as we
And I mean,
dig,
margins are so thin. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead, Grace.
and as we dig, we realize, and this is just, I think our baseline now is that those arms are usually connected to like one or two bodies. And it's
Yeah.
usually,
Yeah. That's
like,
good.
it's a 9-headed monster by the end of it. And I think it's one of those realities that we dishonor our customers if we don't say out loud, and like if we don't really acknowledge, and the way we do business, right, and the way that we put our efforts and where we put our defenses and all of that. I think we got to call a spade a spade. If you can't look your monster in the eye, then who are you fighting, right?
Sounds like you're writing the plot for Invasion of the Margin Snatchers.
I was gonna say body snatchers. No, margin snatchers.
Hey
That's a good
man,
one.
don't get me started on good ideas. I already want us animated. We could get a cartoon. We could have
Okay.
we could have a digital comic book. We could
She's
get
like, I've got it. I've got the idea.
Come on, imagine a little zine going out of just
All
your
I want is royalties from your book, Grace. That's all I want. Just
Well, if we're talking about little green men, what about the company with a green logo? Probably want to talk in a nice way here, but Shopify seems to really be trying to fill that gap. From what I've seen, there's questions and there's answers. Shopify seems to be passing more data to merchants around things like attribution, around things like channel sourcing. We see that firsthand. My question becomes, is there a cannibalistic thing going on here where I have to fight for real estate? If I'm a Shopify merchant, I have to fight for real estate with other Shopify merchants to get prioritized, listing in in a chatbot environment. What do you think about that? What does the panel think about that?
I'll just jump right in because I was at NRF this year and I actually heard Harley Finkelstein talk about, this product syndication, which is still very fascinating to me. And I'm trying to unpack because I don't know that I know all of the details around it, but it is kind of content syndication for inventory, right? That is, part of the Shopify ecosystem. So if you're a Shopify merchant and you use their storefront, they own your inventory data or they have access to it. Let's put it that way, right? And so the idea is let's basically make almost like an eBay marketplace of sellers made up of merchants, right? That we are contractually in a partnership with. But hey, you shopper, you get the benefit of access to all of this inventory now. Like you can see all of it on a single platform. And of course, it depends on who Shopify is partnering with, but they've named a few big ones, of course. And so I think if whatever they're giving merchants, let's say they're giving them attribution data or referral data or whatever, the trade-off is I don't know that merchants have too much of a choice. They're going to be syndicated out into the world via these platforms so that when I'm searching for an item, to your point, I'm going to maybe pop up next to my competitor, which not great for a brand. They don't love that. And I don't know that that's ever going to change. I think that's always a very sensitive topic for merchants is like adjacencies they can be a killer, right? And so I don't know in that new world how much control, and this goes back to the whole control theme, right, of like data and control, and as a merchant your own kind of proprietary data. I don't know how much control they have over that, right? If they're already in a contract with Shopify, right? So what do you do from there except maybe leave Shopify as your storefront? I don't know.
It's giving me the accept terms and conditions world that
Yeah, vibes. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Apple and iOS started of we're going to give you this long list of stuff and you're not going to be able, I mean, if you can read it,
You're not going to read it all.
you're not. And that ties you into something. And we now, I think, are seeing the affects of what that long game is, because now those people who kind of built business on that, Shopify being that one we're talking about, a very data heavy space, is now kind of having to pay the piper as well. They probably have some terms and conditions to be able to get into ChatGPT, to get into these other spaces. So it's like, where's this cycle and where does it end? Can it end? Where are we now?
And I also think it's hard too because like we were saying at the top of the session, Mike, this is another channel of business. This is how I'm thinking about this, right? Is like you've got brick and mortar and wholesale and e-commerce, and now this agentic channel is another way for merchants to get revenue. But if they can't optimize or it's hard to, or they can't pop to the top of that search on ChatGPT, but they're kind of just thrown into this big inventory pool because they're part of the Shopify world, is that like a ding on their, like are they able to actually get the benefit, reap the benefit of the, revenue that this new channel could bring, right? It's kind of where I'm also where my head's at.
I do think it's important to remember that this is a channel and that, I've never been good at predicting the future, but I don't think anytime soon is everybody going to be buying everything through agentic commerce. And so,
I agree.
retailers know this better than anybody. They still have to, but you still have to keep up all those other channels you're working on and all those other strategies you use. And, we've seen in the past how resilient and creative retailers are. I mean, this is a question maybe you were asking as far as Shopify policies and things, but are there ways to take advantage of agentic commerce in a way that we saw retailers do with marketplaces? For instance, I don't put all my inventory on Amazon, for instance. I put select items and I have almost competing items that I sell solely through my website. Is there some way to take advantage of ChatGPT that way and not have it be a threat, even when you're literally competing side by side with your
I mean,
competitor?
that's the exclusivity play, right? And I actually remember back to my wholesale days, and this was way, way back when I worked at Theory, which was one of my first corporate retail jobs. And it was interesting because when we would go to market, so we were the wholesaler and we were selling wholesale to like a Bloomingdale's, Nordstrom, Saks, etc. We would cut exclusive items for each of these partners, and they were literally different by what, like 2 buttons or something, but it was like the exclusive item, or maybe it's in a different colorway. And it was a way for us to make sure that partnership between us, they felt very special, right? The retailers we were working with. But it was a way to protect parts of the business where we felt that was a really strategic way for us to protect different channels of business, right? And different partnerships. That just made me think of that because I think you're right, Megan. Like maybe it's like a agentic exclusive, products that the merchants only drop on that channel and you just really can't find it anywhere else. Like you're never going to find it in store. We don't ship to stores. We don't ship it to our wholesalers, whatever. So that's very interesting.
But I think you're gonna also hit what loyalty is gonna turn into and look like. We're talking subscription model, we're talking basis of a lot of this continued e-com at all. Like that's that's the automatic payment. That's the being part of the club. So I think that's what it's gonna look like.
Yeah.
I think every time we talk about these advances in technology and this such a computer technical driven language, we get so much more tapped into the human experience. And I think that's exactly why we have to have these conversations still, because as we feel farther and farther away from each other, it's like on the other side of the coin is how closer and closer we need to be in really pushing this forward in an intentional way. So loving that.
Yeah.
Thank
you, Grace. That's very similar to what I was going to say because it was I was thinking back to my last conversation with my guest the other week, which is I think it's really going to push merchants to think about unifying that online and offline experience even more, right? So making sure that how people feel and react and interact with your brand online is just as compelling as it is in the real world. Because I think as we move into this agentic world, it's just going to naturally, to your point, Mike, not everyone's going to I'm certainly not shopping agentically right now. I'll be totally honest. Like I'm not doing that right now. Will I? Maybe. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it because I have kind of my own routine. But I do think as we move more into this agentic world, it may actually do the opposite, which is really push people towards a lot of these human experiences and, making sure that there's this unification between the real world, right, and what's happening in the agentic space.
Anyone who's going to make it out of this at the top of the heap has to operate with the journalistic imperative in mind, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And if you don't know who's coming in, how they're getting there, what they're doing, and why they're doing it, you'll be lost. And that has been the case since brick and mortar, since the first mortar was poured.
I love that. The first mortar of all the mortars. Okay, thank you guys. I know Grace had to drop. This was super fun. I can't wait to do this with you guys every week. I think we're gonna have a lot to chew on over the weeks, especially as this engine gets going and like all the stuff coming out. I mean, retailers are always there's a curveball being thrown almost every week. So I'm sure we'll have some good stuff to talk about. And I can't wait to keep doing this with you guys. Until next week, when we talk to you again about some happenings in the retail and e-commerce world. Check out the Digital Edge. You can find us everywhere the pods are, Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And get ready for some really fun and interesting topics this year. I'm super jazzed. So glad for you guys to be here. Hit subscribe, do all the things, and we'll talk to you guys next time.